Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Daydream Nation, and I've got two honourable guests back to the channel. I've got Stephen Schnee from the CD Junkie. Hello, Steve.
Hello, Peter. Thank you for inviting me.
Not a problem. And Tim Durling from Tim's Vinyl Confessions. G'day, mate. How you going?
I'm doing really good, Peter. This is a different kind of episode for me, but I'm looking forward to it.
Indeed. We're going to spotlight our three favourite tracks from a particular artist who's a singer, a songwriter, and an actor. He may be able to dance as well, but let's say he's a triple threat. And I'm talking about the Australian legend, Rick Springfield. Now, Rick Springfield in the early 80s was very much at the top of the charts all around the world. He was in General Hospital. Jessie's Girl was #1. I think it's kind of timely that we look back at the catalogue of Rick Springfield, pick our three favourite songs, and then maybe do some honourable mentions and just go off in different angles because Rick Springfield has had a mighty career indeed.
And he's even still around with a brand new album.
Absolutely. And did a recent episode on YouTube of What's in Your Bag on Amoeba. Please check it out. Really fascinating.
I was going to mention earlier this year, I did a CD Junkie video on Rick Springfield where I started with Zoot and went right up to, it was right before this album came out. So basically like right up to the Red Locusts, which is that band that he's in that he's not mentioned, but it's actually a Rick Springfield project. You can get that through his website. Anyway, go ahead.
Good stuff. Let's start off with you, Stephen. What is your first pick?
Well, I'm going to go backwards. So there's something, I love Rick Springfield, his entire career, but I'm a pop kid and I'm a sappy pop kid. So my number 3 isn't quite sappy, but it's very pop. And it is Don't Talk to Strangers, which I think is an amazing song. Still to this day, just hear just the first couple notes of the song, and I'm just taken right back 40 years. Just incredible pop song.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was another big hit for Rick in the US.
And it's taken from the Success Hasn't Spoiled Me Yet album.
Yeah. Love the dog. It's a common theme with 2 of his albums, or maybe 3.
Yeah,
I'm
Ron.
not sure. Yeah,
Ron was the name of the dog.
Ron the dog. Run dog. All right, Tim, what's your first pick?
This is a lot of fun because I grew up listening to pop radio in the 80s, and Rick Springfield was everywhere. So these aren't really in any particular order, but I thought, and mine won't be terribly deep. But I thought I would go with, I really started seriously paying attention to what was popular and what was on the radio as 1984 gave way to 1985. That's really when I started listening to top 40 radio, Casey Kasem, Rick Dees, the American top 40, and Canadian radio as well. I grew up right on the US-Canadian border, so I got a taste of both sides. But I have the fondest memories of that time because everything was so new. I was just learning about who sang what and what songs, they sang this song too, and just putting this all together. I was 10. So I was really just putting it all together. And the first new Rick Springfield song that I remember hearing brand new was Celebrate Youth. So that's the song I'm going with. Never hear it anymore, for whatever reason. And I don't think it was a huge hit, but I know it was a top 40 hit. But that just takes me right back to like spring 85. So that's my first choice, Celebrate Youth.
Absolutely. I've forgotten all about that song. And I can actually visualize the video clip. Yeah. Was that a bit of a hit, Steve?
Celebrate Youth, I remember it got a lot of push. I don't remember. Was it? It's off the album Cow.
I could look it up, but I think it was somewhere in the 20s.
Yeah,
like
because
number 22 or 23 or something like that. I don't think wasn't top 10, but it was a top 40.
Yeah, I remember it got a lot of push, and this was following on from the big success of the Living in Oz album, and then the horrific fall with the Hard to Hold, I think, came out in between. And then Celebrate Youth was just advancing on, building on that sort of keyboard AOR sound. that he had been building with Living in Oz. So I remember the video getting a lot of airplay on MTV.
Yeah, yeah. Because his sound in the 80s definitely evolved, because in the early 80s, I'm sure we'll talk about this when we get deeper in the show. To my ears, he was very power pop. But
yeah,
towards
absolutely.
Towards the mid 80s, which was a typical of many acts, the synths came in, a little bit of crunch in the guitars, and it became very AOR, as he
Yes,
said. So I
very.
think from that album, Living in Oz onwards, definitely he was treading in that sort of territory.
Yeah.
All right. Great pick, Tim. I'm going to go for something a little bit obscure, but this song is in the Rick Springfield song set, fairly consistency. I'm talking about Take a Hand from 1976. This was from an album called Wait for Night, which was on the Chelsea label, but got buried. The album got re-released in the early 80s when Rick Springfield was, a superstar.
Yeah.
Now, this song, when you listen to it, it's got these sort of boogie-woogie piano, and you think, oh, it's got a little bit of Billy Joel. There's a little bit of Toto in respect of it, and you've got these nice soul revival. It's got a soul revival feel to it because it's got the backup singers. It's very soulful, and the lyrics are just extremely positive, very simple. Just turn up the radio, hold your loved ones, and things will be all right. So I think it's a mighty fine song. And look, Rick Springfield showed right from the get-go that he had musical chops in his songwriting. And it just got better as the decade wore on. So that's my first pick, Take a Hand off the Wait for Night album. All right, Steve, what's your next pick?
Okay, again, going with the pop and going with the sap. Number 2 from the same album, Success Hasn't Spoiled Me Yet. What Kind of Fool Am I? Which, I don't know, maybe at that time I had just broken up with my girlfriend. What was it, 82 or something? 81. But that song hit me like a ton of bricks back then. And I've never been able to lose that feeling or that emotion attached to it whenever I listen to it. So it's not like I just sit there and I just start sobbing or whatever, but it reminds me of just how powerful music can be. And for some people, it's just a silly little, top 40 pop hit. But we all connect to music differently. And that's why What Kind of Fool Am I from Success Hasn't Spoiled Me Yet is my number 2 favorite Rick Springfield song.
Yeah, look, it's amazing like music can connect us in those ways, because I can sort of remember a lot of songs where I first heard it. Actually, I can't remember what CD I bought 3 weeks ago, but I can remember a record or an album I bought like 35 years ago. It's just weird.
I can remember the smell of the first Beat album when I slit that plastic open in 1979 to take out the inner sleeve, and just the smell of the ink or whatever.
Yeah.
It stays with me. I remember the taste of gum that I was listening to when I played "Give Me Love" by George Harrison, 7-inch single for the first time.
Yeah,
back in the 70s.
Yeah, I don't know if it was the same in the States, but when I was in the late 70s and early 80s, there was much more of a connection with radio, where I'd be sitting in my room and turning on the radio and actually sitting down and listening to it. Now, radio today is kind of, it's in the car, it's background, it's not front and center. Was that the case for you guys, like in the late 70s, early 80s, that radio was definitely much more of a feature in your lives?
Absolutely.
I had the same. I had a favorite station, and I basically, it was on all the time.
Yeah. I remember, them on a Tuesday saying, Friday, we've got the brand new Paul McCartney song, right? And and my brother and I go, oh my God, it's just a couple more days. And we're waiting for the countdown. And then there it was, Listen to What the Man Said came on the radio. And me and my brother looking at each other going, whoa. So, that's what radio did. You had such a connection with it, because it was kind of almost like your window to a different world, a different universe. And that's what I loved about radio back then. I think the MTV sort of killed that. And then of course, downloading and streaming was, the bullet in the head, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely. And you use your imagination, didn't you? When you listen to radio,
absolutely.
You had your own video clips in your head.
Yeah. I liked it a lot better that way than than good musicians being bad actors.
Yeah. Or before Russell Mulcahy and Smoke Machines.
Yeah.
And jump cuts.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right, Tim, what's your next pick with Rick Springfield?
So again, this is a radio, a radio memory, and a similar time period to the last track, although it was a little bit before. I wasn't listening all the time, but I don't know if it was a cousin of mine that I was visiting and had the radio on, but it could be my favorite song of his, and that's "Love Somebody" from the Hard to Hold soundtrack. I think that's just a perfect little pop rock song. I know nothing about the movie. I just know that he did most of the soundtrack, but I think that's a great song. Tim Pierce on guitar as usual, great solo. And I love the breakdown at the end and the little riff. And, I think the lyrics are kind of above par for typical pop music, but I think that was a lot of the case back then. It's what he sings it well, and the drums are great. It's a pop rocker, and it's always been one of my favorites. But the cool thing about this, and this is what music can do, I kind of forgot about it. And then in the 90s, I remember I was still listening to radio, not as much, but they Saturday nights they started doing these 80s shows. And that song came on, and I'd forgotten all about it. And it was like, hearing from an old friend. Mm-hmm. It's like, I forgot. All I could remember was the chorus. I couldn't remember the rest of the song. So to get to hear it again, it was like, oh, this is amazing. So yeah, that's my second choice.
Nice.
Yeah, that's the great thing about pop music is, sometimes you could walk around and you could forget how cool the verses are, or how cool the bridge is, or the middle eight, or the little, if you mentioned Flock of Seagulls, I Ran, people walk around going, and I ran, but they don't always remember that, guitar riff running through it. And then you go back and listen to it and you're going, oh, this is a great song,
Yeah.
But not that Flock of Seagulls has anything to do with Rick Springfield.
That's all right. We go in all different directions on this channel. Don't you worry.
You know me. Boing.
No. Steve, do you think Hard to Hold killed that song? Because I think if that song, my personal opinion, was released 3 or 4 years, that would have been top 5. Or if not higher.
It was a top 5 single. It was a big song.
Or the song.
The song was
number
big
1
over here.
Number 1.
Yeah, in fact, on the album, like Love Somebody, Bop Till You Drop was almost a hit. But I mean, the movie itself was just stinky. But some of Springfield's songs on this are just fantastic.
Don't Walk Away is on that, isn't it?
Yeah. Don't Walk Away's on there. Taxi Dancing, which is a duet with Randy Crawford. He actually demoed that during I think the Working Class Dog years, but perfected it for this. And overall, the music's really good.
Yeah.
But the movie isn't really good.
Yeah, I think some wags called it hard to watch, but not hard to hold, hard to watch. But Steve, do you think that the movie being a stinker, and it was a commercial flop, did affect his record sales? Because that song should have been number 1.
It should have been. I do believe that the relative failure of the movie, I mean, if the movie just did okay and didn't get bad reviews or whatever, I think he would have gotten past it. But at the same time, as you guys know, music always evolves. So the teenagers that loved him during Working Class Dog, Success Hasn't Spoiled Me Yet, they were getting older with Living in Oz, and they were maturing with him. And then by the time, let's say, Tao came out, they had already moved on to other bands. And that happens, I think, in any case with almost everybody except like the Beatles and the Rolling Stones.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, what people may not realize is that Rick was probably in his late 30s around that era. Rick was born in 1949 and started out in the late 60s. So he'd done a lot of hard yards, and it was a bit of a middle age bloom, so to speak, in respect of his career. He still looks great. But look, that's a great pick, Tim. I've got no complaints with that. That is top tier Rick Springfield, no doubt. And that was going to be one of my honourable mentions. So well done. I'm going to go back in time to his first band when he was in Australia. He was in a band called the Zoot. Now, the Zoot is known for also having another kind of relatively well-known musician called Beeb Birtles. You may have heard the band Little River Band.
Yes, yeah.
He was
He's a bassist, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Singer-songwriter. Daryl Cotton was was actually the lead singer, but Rick Springfield was the guitarist and the songwriter. I would describe their music as hard rock, stoner rock. It's really worth investigating. In fact, the Zoot were going to do a reunion. Daryl Cotton actually passed away about 10 years ago, and they were going to bring in Russell Morris, who may be well known to some folk out there for The Real Thing, which is an absolute garage rock, classic psychedelic rock. Check it out. It's a brilliant song. And unfortunately, COVID hit, and the tour got scrapped. So I'm still waiting for it to, getting everybody together, because that would be really worth seeing, the Zoot reform. Anyway, the Zoot, they were kind of marketed as a bit of a teeny bopper band, but teeny bopper bands in the late 60s had a bit of rock crunch. Like Bon Scott was in a band called the Valentines, and they used to wear kind of colourful costumes. Bon Scott, teeny bopper idol, mind boggles.
Yeah, yeah.
The Zoot's angle were pink. They used to wear pink outfits, and there was a big theme of when they were doing the Traps of Australia called Think Pink, and they were competing with Bon Scott's band, the Valentines.
Wow.
Anyway, one of their huge hit was a rock version, a really heavy stoner, deep groove version of Eleanor Rigby. Check it out. Talk about that more about later. But the song I'm going to pick is called The Freak. And this is came out in 1971. It's phonetic. It's just got wonderful hard rock riffage. It's almost borderline stoner rock. And it's a Rick Springfield composition. And you can see at such a young age, he was a fully formed, mature songwriter. He had the chops. So it's wonderfully composed. In the middle of the song, it kind of goes into this acoustic bit, and it sounds like the Birds, and then it goes back to stoner riffage. So there's a little bit of prog in there as well. But that's my pick, The Freak, because I've got to put a bit of a shout out to the Zoot, because I'm a huge Zoot fan, and they were just immense. Are you familiar with this song, Steve? The Freak or Zoot?
I'm familiar with Zoot because I have a CD best of, but I have to admit it's not something that I've gone back and listened to a lot. But it is something that I have essentially because it's the only thing I can track down by them.
Yeah.
I don't know if their albums have been released, because I think he came in like halfway through, didn't he? Like
yes, he did. Yeah. Well, they've just re-released a couple of their albums. They only did 2. And maybe just for the folks out there, just get their greatest hits, but it's really worth investigating. And it's eons away from the sound in the 80s. So,
totally.
But anyway, that's my pick. So, Steve, what's your final one?
Okay. Now, before I tell you my final one, can I quickly tell you my 5 runners up?
Sure.
Okay, 5 runners up are going to be, let me see here. Affair of the Heart, which, hold on, let me make sure I can get this. Affair of the Heart, which is on Living in Oz. Jessie's Girl, which is on Working Class Dog. Honeymoon in Beirut, which is on Rock of Life. Speak to the Sky, which everybody knows from the first album that came out, 72, 71?
73, I think 73.
Yeah.
72 or 73, yeah.
Right. And then the last runner-up before I tell you what my number one is a song called Will I off of this 2004 album. And finally, the song that I chose as number one, my favorite Rick Springfield, is what I consider a Rick Springfield classic and a power pop classic. And it's a song called Love Is All Right Tonight from Working Class Dog, which is just as power pop as they come, as it just hits you. It's got energy, it's got hooks, it's got passion, it's got everything you want out of a pop song. And I think it should have been bigger than Jessie's Girl, as much as I love Jessie's Girl. And Jessie Girl, I think, has a perfect ending of a song. You know, that it's one of my favorite pop song endings. But Love Is All Right Tonight beats it. And that's my number one.
Every time I hear look, I'm giving myself away, but every time I hear the ending of Jessie's Girl, it brings a smile to my face because I agree with you. It's like a perfect circle. It's just
absolutely
closes it out perfectly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Look, people talk about the knack, power pop, anything that was around that era, the romantics, but people forget Rick Springfield was right in the power pop wheelhouse. But they sort of associate him more as a pop star, singing pop songs.
Yeah, in America, it was very difficult for him to shake that teen idol thing because Rick Springfield was not a teen idol. I mean, as an artist, he didn't say, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to do teen idol, but he got caught up in the business and they threw him in a cartoon in the 70s and they started, sort of throwing him at the kids and stuff. And then by the time General Hospital came around, then all the girls went crazy about him. And he was a legit singer, songwriter, great guitar player. Really just, I'm glad General Hospital happened because it brought him out and it allowed him to sell records and it allows him to make records today. But I think that if General Hospital hadn't happened, he would have been taken more seriously, but his career would not have been as long, I believe.
So he might have had the lifespan of, say, a David Cassidy or a Sean Cassidy or a Leif Garrett, like 1 or 2 years, because doing a sort of a social study on pop idols, it seems like in America that they only had a shelf life, very limited, only have a couple of albums.
Yeah, because the girls finally turned 13 and they grew up, and it's like, well, I'm not listening to Donny Osmond. I'm listening to, whatever the latest K-pop group is or New Kids on the Block, forget about those other bands. Remember Bobby Sherman and all these people, they were the huge, and it lasted a year or two. And that's
Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm sure that there was a crossover episode in General Hospital between him in playing music and I don't know. Maybe I'm going to research this, but I reckon there was a crossover episode, and that doesn't help. That doesn't hurt when you're doing a bit of cross marketing between the soap you're on and your music career.
I think like the best thing is he signs a contract. I mean, this could have happened. I don't know, but he signs a contract. So then during the season, he's at a bar talking with somebody and, he's playing his character, Noah Drake or whatever, but on the jukebox in the background, they're playing Rick Springfield.
Yeah. Well, if I'm wrong, it's not going to be in the show. I'll edit it out. Yeah. But if it's right, you heard it here. It's just, it's one of those memories that right in the back of my brain that I cannot confirm, folks. But I just got this feeling that there was some sort of a cross-marketing angle. So I don't know. All right, Tim, what's your number one pick?
Okay, well, I had a couple of runners up. One of them is Bop to Drop because just simply memories of hearing that on the radio and 1984. 1984 was such an amazing year in music, not just rock music, but I just think there were so many, pop artists, hard rock, metal, I think there were a lot of peaks being reached that year. So I have fond memories of a lot of that music. And that's, to me, that makes me think of that summer when I hear Bob Do You Drop. Maybe it wasn't out at that time. That's what it makes me think of. The other one is Rock of Life, the title song, which was his last, was a top 20 single. I think it hit number 19 in 1988. Kind of a different direction for him, I think it was. It's a harder rocking song, certainly harder rocking than the stuff that was on Tao. But yeah, those are my honorable mentions. So for my number one, I'm surprised nobody's mentioned it yet because a lot of the big hits have been covered, and I may be taking one away from Peter. But summer 1988, I remember my cassette collection. I was really just within my first year of building a music collection and not just listening to songs off the radio and recording them onto a cassette. We were on a family vacation, and whatever, spending money that I had with me, it was just about gone. But we had, we were in one more store, last store we were going to before we headed home. And if you guys know what I mean by, I didn't know back then, but people call them truck stop cassettes. Yeah. They're, or truck stop CDs. They're not actual albums. They're really cheap record company ones. They just throw them out and put a cheap, looking cover and a cheap price tag. And I had a certain amount of money left. And the only thing I saw that caught my eye was this. Now, this is Sammy Hagar. The name of this cassette is Red Hot. Now, this is not an actual album. This got a copyright date of 87 on it. These are various live songs from his album All Night Long and Live 1980 that Capitol threw out when he joined Van Halen. I mean, they did that a lot, but, he had joined Van Halen at this point. So I bought it. I'm like, and I looked at the song titles really quick. I'm like, I don't recognize anything on here, but I like Van Halen. Like, I'm way into Van Halen at this point. I'm like, he's their singer. I like Can't Drive 55. Yeah. What the heck? I'm going to buy it. So I took a chance on it. So I'm listening to it. And I get to last song on this cassette. Because I'm listening, and it's got Bad Motor Scooter Space Station number 5, which I didn't know anything about Montrose at that point. Rock and Roll Weekend, Plain Jane. And the very last song on here is called I've Done Everything for You. And I'm listening to it and I go, wait a minute. I've heard this before, but not by Sammy Hagar. And I'm like, this is a Rick Springfield song. What's going on? Well, Here's the thing. I didn't know what was going on. This was pre-internet. I had nowhere to go. I didn't know. I had nobody I could ask. I just didn't understand. So I'm like, it just kind of sat there, right? I was like, I know I've heard the song before and I know why I've heard it. Why is Sammy Hagar doing a Rick Springfield song? And then later on in years, I found out that Sammy Hagar actually wrote and originally recorded this song. Yeah. And it was actually the live version. So not from this, but from his album All Night Long from 78. That producer Keith Olsen, who was working with Sammy and Rick right around the same time, because he produced Standing Hampton and Three Lock Box for Sammy. And I think he did the first 3 RCA albums for Rick. And I think this was on Working Class Dog. And Keith said, hey, listen to this. Why don't you, do something with this song? It actually became his first top 10 single before Jessie's Girl. And it was a big songwriting boost for Sammy, who at that point hadn't charted yet. Like he hadn't had a big hit single. So, and Rick's version is much faster than Sammy's. He actually adds a little bit of a riff to it at the beginning of it. But no matter how you get it, I think you guys said it. It's a great power pop song. So that's my pick is I've Done Everything for You. Pick a version. It's a good song.
That's a great song. And yes, he did steal one of my picks, but that's cool. I like it. I like it a lot. I haven't heard the Sammy Hagar version. What does that sound like?
The studio version is really slow compared to Rick's version.
Does he do a higher register in the vocal? Mid?
I think it's in the same key. I think it's in the key of E, but it's like dun 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 dun.
And the live version, the Sammy rasp.
Yeah, the live version is a little faster, and it's probably like Rick's version was probably more based on the live version because it is a lot faster. But the beginning's very different.
Yeah.
I mean, Sammy's verse just starts with down, 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 like that.
Yeah.
And Rick's got the dun, 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 like he's got a riff on it, which is kind of cool.
Right.
So
that's just a power pop-tastic song, isn't it? It just
Mhm.
chugs
Yeah.
along. It's just got so much drive and power. Fantastic.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you for that. Couple of my honorable mentions, which we've already covered. Don't Talk to Strangers, Affair of the Heart, and Zoot, Eleanor Rigby, which I said earlier in the show, which is just a wonderful cover version. It's sort of sped up. It's heavier. It's really worth checking out. But just to be clear, the Zoot, it was Darryl Cotton. That was the singer of the band. Rick was on guitar, but I'm including him as one of the picks because Rick's part of the band. And, it's his wonderful, guitar licks all the way through. So, okay, Jessie's Girl. I love it. That's my number one pick. I think it's just a compelling song. The story goes that Rick was in a art class and there was this girl that he was besottled by, and she had a boyfriend, and he was infatuated by this lady, and the boyfriend's name was actually Gary. It wasn't Jessie. So Gary's girl doesn't have the same ring as Jessie's girl, and they tried to track down the actual girl. They were able to track down the art class teacher that Rick attended, but unfortunately, the list of all the students had been destroyed years ago. So people actually have a lot of time on their hands doing like an archaeological dig and then trying to get back and find, you could imagine it was one of those sort of episodes where they finally reunite Rick and the girl and sort of like that, but never happened. Yeah. So
it's pop culture, right? Like it's beyond any one artist. That song is pop culture.
Yeah.
Everybody knows it.
I love the guitar.
To the point where he's sometimes referred to in North America, believe it or not, as a one-hit wonder, which he clearly was not.
He's not.
He had a good dozen, fairly big hits, but that song is it's like Eye of the Tiger for Survivor. They had a good half dozen pretty big hits, but that's, there are certain songs that are just bigger.
Well, I mean, he had a hit with Speak to the Sky. That was, it hit number 35, and that was unheard of an Australian male rock artist or pop artist to actually break through to America and reach that high in the charts.
And I remember when it was a hit here in America.
Yeah.
It's interesting there's such a gap, because that was 72, 73, and then it wasn't until 81.
Yeah.
So he paid his dues.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, I think most people who had like when Jessie's Girl came out and he became famous, I'd say a good 99% of the people that got into them at that point didn't know about Speak to the Sky.
Probably thought it was his debut, brand new artist, and had no idea he was 32 at that time.
Yeah.
And sonically, it's a different type of song. I like that song a lot, but it's kind of whimsical. You've got a little bit of banjo. It's very spiritual. Yeah. It's like night and day compared sonically with Jessie's Girl, which has got that really driving hard rock type of guitar. I've got to put a shout out for Neil Giraldo from Pat Benatar. His guitar's all over that album, and he's like a very valuable player and part of the sonics of that Rick Springfield band. So
and if anybody hasn't seen it, I would highly recommend the Sound City documentary.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is a great documentary, and Rick's in that a lot because he, all of those early albums were recorded there, like the albums that made him a star.
Yeah. And I'd mentioned earlier about the ending of Jessie's Girl. Just the whole song is just written, produced, performed so perfectly. And like I said, those last few notes, the whole breakdown, that ding ding, I did it before, and it reminds me of when you'd be watching Cheers. I don't know if they played that in Australia, but Cheers, you watch it, and then when the credits are rolling, and you hear the theme or whatever, and then at the end of it, you just hear the little piano go like do 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 do, and oh crap, I gotta wait another week for the next episode. But no, when you heard those last chords of Jessie's Girl, it just made you just go, I gotta freaking hear that again, and just put the needle right back.
Put the needle right back where it
and
was.
It's off. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's kind of off time. It's like da 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 da.
Yeah, it's an off. Right. You are right. It's an offbeat, and it works.
Yeah. It works. Catches the ear every time, right? It's
Absolutely.
like, thank you for listening.
When you have moments like that in a song where it's offbeat, you wonder if it's actually contrived or it just happened that way. It's organic. Because some great songs, mistakes make the song. Imperfections, it's actually perfect imperfect.
Yeah.
It's if it was done quote unquote correctly, it would have been like down 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 down. But that sounds, when I do it, that sounds forced.
Yeah,
there was just one last down, and we're done.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the lyrics. I think it's a simple tale, but it's so compelling. And when Rick is singing it, he sings it with so much drive and conviction. You're drawn into this story. You feel his angst. I think it's one of the best vocals he's ever done.
You believe that there is a Jessie's Girl, and it's not just him just going, oh, hey, that's a cool idea for a song.
Yeah.
It sounds like the stakes, there's some stakes there for him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He's totally invested in the material. And that's one of the attributes of Rick Springfield. A lot of the material that he sings, he's emotionally invested in it and makes you, the listener, invested in it as well. So
it's interesting that he titled his, I've not read it, but he titled his autobiography Late at Night.
Right. Yeah.
See, like even up to Automatic, he's still into it. You know what I mean? It's like he's not going through the motions. And it sounds like he's still, with Rick Springfield, with that shift in sound from Success to Living in Oz. It sounded like he just said, you know what? I'm tired of writing pop songs. I want to write rock songs.
Mm.
And then from then on, and he's been up and down that roller coaster. Sometimes he concentrates more on keyboards. Sometimes it's more on these, cool little harmony arrangements. But it seems like he's still searching. He's still exploring in his music, as opposed to just going like, oh, it's time for another tour. Let's put out an album. Most artists don't make money on albums anymore, so they don't put them out. They just tour. But Rick Springfield still puts albums out because he still feels that need.
Got something to say.
Yeah.
Did you gents see the movie Boogie Nights?
Yes.
I did not.
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
That scene, that movie was great because it sort of brought to public consciousness a lot of songs.
Well, certainly Night Ranger Sister Christian benefited from that.
I never heard that song until Boogie Nights,
wow.
Sister Christian. So, because that wasn't a hit over here. But that scene with Jessie's Girl where you've got the Mark Wahlberg character, Dirk Diggler, with John C. Reilly, and they're doing a drug deal in the Hollywood Hills with the guy, the actor is Alfred Molina, and he's wearing this silk dressing gown. He's just a real sleazeball character. And Mark Wahlberg is off his chops and he's sitting down. And the drug dealer's character is playing Jessie's Girl on the stereo. And it's just got this fine balance between tension and comedy because you've got, Jessie's Girl's playing. You've got this drug dealer that's just going completely, bananas, and Mark Wahlberg's staring into space. And when the music's on, he's like staring, he's like disassociating himself, and he's listening to the lyrics of Jessie's Girl. And it's as if in the movie, he's imagining he's the Rick Springfield character, and he's hey, I'm in a really bad dangerous criminal situation here. Yeah. I wish I was like in Rick's situation.
Yeah.
Perfect sort of synergy between a song on a soundtrack and actually what's happening on the screen. And I thought that was a wonderful way to reintroduce Rick Springfield to the public. And I think it got on the soundtrack. Mm-hmm. And what are your thoughts? Is that sort of how you felt when you saw that movie? I know you haven't seen it for a while.
I can see where you get that from it. I didn't get that from it because I was too busy paying attention to what the hell's going on here. Because it's just a fantastic film. But yes, to have somebody drawn into the music and almost taken out of the situation that, that they're in, in a sense, that's what we all do every day with our music. It's like, oh God, I've got deadlines here. Let's throw on Working Class Dog and sort of ease that or distract from the bad that's going on around us,
Yeah. But I think that there are some soundtracks where they just put music where it doesn't do anything. The narrative, it's just, here's an old song from the 70s or 80s. But this was one song that actually,
specific.
It's sort
of. And you
might
not think, if someone were to describe it to you, you might think, really, is that Jessie's girl going to work in a scene like that? It's like, just watch it. Watch how they do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. See, that's the thing, because a lot of the directors, they film based on that particular song. So it's always like such a disappointment if they can't license it at the end of the day.
Yeah.
There have been many
they film
people
it to the beats of the song, the parts of the song, they'll cut to another character and or it's like when you watch, I'm just going to use the example WKRP in Cincinnati, well-known TV series, played a lot of popular music of the day, but when it came out on DVD, the licensing was such, they just have generic music playing. I don't know if that ever got resolved, but it's like you remember, sometimes you might remember a scene because of a particular song, and then you hear it, you're like, that's not right. That's not how that was.
Yeah.
Well, I think Quentin Tarantino is wonderful in that. He brings a lot of those older songs, and it's just the perfect synergy between what's happening on the screen and the subtext with what's on the actual song. He just doesn't throw songs just for the hell of it. It's got to actually mix. And I just think Jessie's girl in that scene where it's so tense, but it's so there's an element of comedy. It's just absolutely perfect. And I just thought that was just great, introducing Rick Springfield to a whole new generation of audiences, as well as Sister Christian with Night Ranger, who I had never heard of.
Yeah.
So there you go. One quick shout out for Rick Springfield's movie career or acting career. He's got a lot of chops. I was looking at his CV. Hard to Hold, which was hard to watch. General Hospital, True Detective, he was on that, and Californication.
That's right.
He was in a few series of them, and Ricky and the Flash, which I think was Jonathan Demme's last film with Meryl Streep. He was mighty fine in that movie as well.
And wasn't he? You may have mentioned that he was supposed to play like a vampire, like a detective vampire or something Night.
Yeah,
and
I think Supernatural. Was he in Supernatural?
No. It was like the character's last name was Knight, Knight. And I'm probably getting this confused with something else, but I thought it was like he was like a vampire. But it wasn't like a vampire show. He just happened to be a vampire. And or something like that, some kind of dark sorcery or something. But I remember thinking like, oh, is that going to be a series? But I don't know if it ever actually came out, if it was just a made-for-TV movie, or if he was ever involved. But I remember reading a lot about it, and it just sounded vaguely interesting. Just like wasn't Baywatch Nights, David Hasselhoff? that was a short-lived show where they were like battling like werewolves or something.
You got me there.
I'm completely stumped, but I'll put a little postscript. I'll do my research once I get offline and have a look at it. But I know
it certainly sounds like something that Rick Springfield he wouldn't want to do lightweight things. I don't think at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've also heard him, and I don't know if he still does it, but he would host a show on Sirius XM, the 80s on 8, where he'd pick a theme, but he would be the DJ for the show.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And one thing, he needs to come to Australia because he has not toured Australia since the early 70s. So,
wow.
I mean, as a fully fledged solo artist. So
wow.
He was part of a road show called Countdown Explosion. There was a music show in Australia called Countdown.
Yes.
And he was part of that. And he just did 3 or 4 songs as a melody.
Right.
But he has not toured Australia doing a 90-minute show in his own right. And the Zoot would have been a kind of a return. So, Rick, pull your finger out and come to Australia. We'd love to see you. And I'm sure he would have fans. He would sell out medium-sized theaters easily.
Yeah.
But not since the early 70s. That's a long time. Aussie Rick.
I will mention I cannot stand covers albums. Cannot. I don't like covers albums at all. But I like Rick's. I love when he does I'm Not in Love. It's pretty much almost straight note for note of the 10cc, even down to the the like the sampled voices going left to right.
That's a complicated arrangement.
Yeah, and he puts a little Rick Springfield twist in it, but he's connecting with a song. Maybe not quite Eric Stewart of the original, but I love his version of I'm Not in Love. I also love his version of Under the Milky Way.
Yes.
The Church.
Wow.
Yes.
Okay.
He mentioned that in the show that he did, the Amoeba record store show, What's in Your Bag?
Yeah.
And he is a huge Church fan. He called Steve Kilbey as Australia's answer to David Bowie. So really interesting show, folks. Have a look at it because he's talking about some tales of the 70s and his influences.
Yeah, that's the album, The Day After Yesterday's his covers album.
All right. I will check that out. Always good to have you on the show, Steve. My wallet opens up and I buy stuff. May not be a good thing, but...
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Steve, in my CD room. Looks like my CD room. You can see Steve on the CD Junkie, plenty of shows. Tim, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Something completely different today, and it was just great talking. Here you can see Tim on Tim's Vinyl Confessions and also the Contrarians from time to time. Please like and subscribe to this little channel. Click the bell. Rock Daydream Nation. Tell us what you think about Rick Springfield, your favorite songs, any anecdotes about Rick. But one thing's for sure, you'll see us gentlemen on a show very soon. Cheers.